everyone. This is ring announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Make sure you check them out on Facebook. Jackie Richardson, Alex Ramos do a great job there. I am your co-host, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in one of my other co-hosts, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing good. I'm always doing good when I get to talk boxing with you guys, so let's get it going.
All right, and of course, as always, we've got John Einreinhofer. I didn't have anything cute to say this week about John. It's just John Einreinhofer.
Still great to be here.
All right, so we didn't do a show for 6 weeks, so now we figured we'd just do one every 2 days from here on out now. But we're going to start off, we're going to talk about the fights that happened last weekend that were not Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Then we'll preview the fights coming up this week. Then we'll take a quick look at the heavyweight division, where that stands. But let's start off with last week. We're going to go to the undercard of Fury Wilder. We're going to talk a little Travis Coffin, Luis Ortiz. Ortiz stopped him in the 10th round. Ortiz looked like he was in better shape, at least this time, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was because there was no drug testing. I don't know, but it was a pretty lackluster fight. It didn't seem as if Kaufman really came to bring it. I mean, he's always been a boxer type, and when you're fighting another boxer type who's superior to you in every aspect of the game, it just doesn't turn out well. I mean, and it seemed like Ortiz was just kind of pacing himself anyways. He didn't really seem, as if he was, really going out to get the knockout. He just did what he does best, and, he sets up that left hand and got the job done. And, yeah, he'll be, I think he's also signed to DAZN, which means that, his potential future opponents, he's got some decent people to look at. I mean, Alexander Povetkin, I think a lot of people would like to see that fight. You're talking about two guys who are, years over the hill, but still got some talent, arguably, top 7 guys or so. And then you got, I know this was thrown around earlier, but the fight against Joe Joyce. I mean, I know Joyce is optimistic, and, he's got an ambitious schedule. He's 33 years old, so I guess he's thinking that he doesn't have much time left. So Joyce against Ortiz, I don't know if that'll really come off, but it would be interesting if it did so. But yeah, I mean, an easy KO win.
Yeah, and I don't think Ortiz is a great fighter, but I think he would knock Joe Joyce out. What do you think, John?
I think he probably does knock Joe Joyce out, but I like the fight. I think.
I think it'll be a good fight.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get that one in the first part of 2019. That's one I'll say I think we're going to get, because it seemed like it almost happened for this card, and then they backed off. They didn't want to quite give the fans that much value.
Yeah.
So they
don't want to give us a $20 pay-per-view for $75. They want to give us a $10 one.
Right. They exactly. They want to keep it to the one fight thing that you want to see. So I think we will probably get this one. But let's look at the bright side. With the new deal, we could get that one on Fox. I don't think that's out of the question. So maybe we'll get that. But yeah, Ortiz, I agree with Jeremiah. Travis Kaufman has some boxing skills, and he did show some heart trying to hang in there. I mean, Ortiz is a big enough of a puncher that you really can't question Kaufman's heart in the way that he wanted to stay in. But I agree with Jeremiah that the guy's got more, even though Ortiz is good, Kaufman's got a little bit more boxing skills than that, and he just didn't want to let go with any kind of offense, and that made it kind of lackluster, and he ended up getting stopped late because he just wasn't offering anything back or really trying to box offensively. But I know some of it's who he's fighting, but the thing about Ortiz that I kind of like lately is, like Jeremiah said, and I've always looked at it the same way, Ortiz always has that, classic, he's got the southpaw jab with a left-handed hammer he brings straight behind it. He's done that since the beginning of his pro career, but here he is, he getting older, and I seem to see more punch variety out of the guy. And he could be a bit more dangerous if that carries over against some tougher opposition. We'll see if he fights Joyce. But I like that fight. I'm that's something I can look forward to in 2019, even if it's a fight that might not last long.
All right, next up we got Jarrett Hurd, KO'd the 4th round against Jason Wellborn. I think this is kind of what we expected. Wellborn did show a lot of heart, John, but he's not on Hurd's level.
No, it looked to me like it could knock them out. And I did tweet that out during the fight. And then when Wellborn opened up a little more, Hurd knocked him out. I like Al Bernstein, but Al Bernstein gets the clunker comment award of the weekend for me when he said during that fight that Jason Wellborn would have been a star in boxing had he punching power. And I don't know on what universe Jason Wellborn would have been a star if he had a little more punching power, but it's not this universe. I think Jarrett Hurd, arguably, I mean, it's not one of these things I'm going to say it's a certainty or if the bouts came off, how I would pick it. But I do feel confident enough in his abilities and what he brings to the table at this point that I think he's capable of beating anybody at 154 and 160 pounds. I will go that far and say that. Shoulder looks like it was okay enough in this Wellborn fight. And if you watch Hurd's entire career, he can do a lot of things. I think some people aren't taking it seriously when he says he can box if he wants to. But earlier in his career, I've seen him do that. But we know he can slug, and we know he's got a good chin, and we know he's aggressive, and he's shown all kinds of good intangible qualities so far. He's got good size for the weight divisions, whether it be 154 or 160. So I think he's ready for anybody. And if he's not a star already, he's a potential future star because of the way he fights. And he's got a lot of bright things ahead of him for me.
All right, Jeremiah, you had the same opinion as Jared?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not convinced of his boxing ability yet. I mean, there were spots in the Wellborn fight where he was frankly taking too many punches. I mean, there was a couple minutes before he actually got the stoppage where, he was taking a number of left hooks and right hooks cleanly, and I was like, it's not necessarily a good look for you. But we talked about this off air, Mike. But the size difference was big, and again, I know we shouldn't always make something about the size difference, but everybody was noting it, and I thought it was clear as day that Hurd looked like he was 2 divisions bigger. I mean, he was massive, and that's one of my things too about this size difference is sometimes it doesn't make a difference, but sometimes it can be, more potent than, taking PEDs or something. I mean, you look at the Gotti Camachi fight, and there are instances where it is serious business, and the IBF is the only alphabet soup organization to take measures to kind of reduce that. But yeah, I mean, it was a mismatch from the beginning. I mean, people got a little amped up once Wellborn started, showing a little heart and doing something. But, I am on the same plane as he provides. I mean, he certainly provides a stiff test for just about anybody out there. I'm definitely not going to go as far as saying he can beat everybody out there. Yeah, to me, he's still got a lot to prove. I do think the Lara fight showed a lot, and I was impressed by that performance. But there's a lot of damn good fighters out there. 154, 160 is heating up recently, and so we'll see how he does in the future. Hopefully, he gets the Charlo fight though.
All right, next up, Alexander Gvozdzik stopped Adonis Stevenson's reign as the lineal light heavyweight champion in the 11th round. Probably the fight of the weekend, Jeremiah, and one of the more devastating knockouts you'll see.
Yeah, I was. I know John and I are both quite happy about the outcome of that fight. A quick note, because I don't want to take too much away from the fight, but that scorecard where the guy had it 98-92 and in Stevenson's favor.
Hey, your phone's cutting out.
Oh, come on, man! You got to suspend. Okay, can you hear me now?
Well, yeah, I can hear you every once in a while. Keep talking, and I'll tell you.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, that 98-92 scorecard was just atrocious, and that guy should be suspended. But Gvozdzik looked good. I mean, initially he looked tentative, especially after he felt Stevenson's power. And then, he caught him with in the third round and knocked him down. And, that was a missed call by the referee. And it was unfortunate. But, Gvozdyk started to find his range. He was counterpunching nicely. He was throwing those lead right hands nicely. And eventually got the job done. I was really happy that he got the knockout, because a lot of us saw Stevenson as a lame duck champion. But now, with the 2012 Ukrainian Olympic team, you have two Lanil champions, and you have, Vasyl Lomachenko, who's a ring champion and should be Lanil at 126.
All right, so, John, what was your take on Gvozdyk in this fight? I thought Stevenson impressed me at his age with the fight that he did put up, but Gvozdyk looked good. I thought he looked a little tentative at the start of the fight, and then I think he just kind of took over the deeper the fight went.
Yeah, I kind of read that the same way. Stevenson, I thought Gvozdyk would end up scoring a big knockout in this one, and he did a little bit later than I thought, but I got to give credit to Stevenson that at 41, considering how good the guy he was fighting was, he actually brought more to the table than I even expected at this point. But, I like Gvozdyk a lot as a fighter. I have up to this point, and I always like Teddy Atlas in general. I don't agree with everything he always says and does, but I do like him in general. And, I enjoy seeing other things that he does. And a lot of people are giving him credit in this, and I give him credit for the ultimate result. But getting back to what you were saying, Mike, I saw that the same way, and getting to what Jeremiah said, Gvozdyk scored a knockdown that was improperly ruled a slip by Stevenson early in the fight. And why I'm talking about that is because I think Gvozdyk could have done what he did in the 11th round a lot earlier. And I think Gvozdyk, to his credit, because you're supposed to listen to his trainer, he was trying to listen to Teddy Atlas, but Teddy Atlas, I think, really was being too cautious. And Mike, as you and I were saying just before we got on the air, philosophy we agree on, and I think this fight, frankly, was a good example of that. Is, it's not always a good strategy to let a guy hang around that you have a chance to stop, even if the guy's a power puncher, because the guy might get more tired, and it worked out in this case, but the guy can also catch you. And Gvozdyk did get caught late in the fight, which really with a shot that he maybe shouldn't have. And frankly, if that was the Stevenson of 3-4 years ago, that shot would have been a little bit sharper and might have gotten him out of there. So, it's not always advisable to let a guy hang around, and I thought he let him hang around a little too long. And then, of course, we have to mention, it was a tragic result in that, Stevenson had to be put into a medically induced coma, which is where my understanding where he's at now. And I'm not a doctor, but I do have to add in this type of situation that I've deposed a lot of doctors, had a lot of serious, brain injury cases. And I haven't read Stevenson's medical records. I haven't talked to his doctors, got to qualify with all that. But, when you've been put into a medically induced coma, and what they're talking about is, he's likely to have parts of his brain that are damaged that control functions.
Yeah.
For example,
anytime it's Wednesday and you were put in it on Saturday or Sunday, that's not a good sign.
Right. I mean, in other words, he could lose, I'm just completely speculating, of course, but could lose speech function, could lose sight function, arms, legs, just all because of brain damage. So it's just a shame. It's not good. And, you have to kind of let everybody, in a way, control their own destiny. And especially in boxing, it's state action, so you can't really age discriminate based on age alone. But if you look at medical research, I don't know exactly what the solution would be, but even fighters that have been effective, it would be a lot safer if fighters just retired earlier. It's just that simple. If they got going younger and retired earlier, you're going to have a little more safety. Not saying you never know if the injury couldn't have happened otherwise, no matter what the age was, but you do know the data about the dangers.
Everybody's different though too, and you don't want to take away a person's livelihood. I mean, if you look at it, George Foreman's winning a heavyweight title at 45. Bernard Hopkins is winning fights in his mid and late 40s. Everybody's different there, and I just think that you've got to let people. I mean, eventually this is on Adonis Stevenson, whatever happens to him, and I hope he's fine. But you know the risk you take when you're a boxer, and if you're willing to take that risk, sometimes things don't work out that great. A fight that interests me on the zone this weekend is Josh Kelly against David Evanesyan. What's your take on Kelly? We'll start off with John first, because I really like Kelly. I really like this matchup. I think Evanesyan is a good, solid fighter. When he stepped up in competition, against like Kavialauskas, he lost. Lamont Peterson, he lost. But he always puts up a good performance. He had a win against an old Shane Mosley. Do you think this is the proper step at this point in the career for Josh Kelly, John?
Yeah, I don't think he should have any trouble here. Just Kelly's one of the guys. I'm not. For me, I'm not down on him. I'm not up on him yet. I don't know. I don't think I'll make up my mind on him with Evanesyan, but I just compare him. And of course, you could compare. Just both happen to be British guys, so I guess it just comes to mind. But I think I'm more sold on even a little bit earlier on. Josh Taylor, I felt more sold on. Kelly, I'm not down on him, but some people are getting real high on him. Some aren't as high. I'm just kind of on him. I'm just some guys I see it and then I've made up my mind, and some guys I have to just see more. I haven't. He's more one of the guys that I just haven't really given my final grade on what he think he's going to be yet or not.
All right, Jeremiah, Josh Kelly.
Josh Kelly, well, I mean, for his 9th fight, I mean, you got to give the guy a lot of credit. I mean, like you said, Evanesyan's not, he's not a world-class operator or anything, but you look at, Kavialauskas, and, Kavialauskas is fighting him in his, 18th, 19th fight, 20th fight, something like that. This is only Kelly's 9th fight. So I think it's a damn good step up for him right now. Evanesyan is a guy who lets his hands go a lot. So I think that will introduce a new type of styles matchup for Kelly to kind of, learn. And I mean, the kid's only 24, but he's 5'10". If there's one thing that I really like about him, defensively, he just seems to have it. There just seems to be guys who just have that built-in radar. They see things coming, instantaneously almost. He seems to be one of those guys. My concern, however, is that he's flashy, and that can hurt you sometimes. Some guys are good enough to get away with it, with Ali and Nicolino Lochi, et cetera, et cetera. My problem is his punching power. I'm not sure he's not a big puncher. He's not a thudding puncher like Errol Spence or Kavialauskas or some of these other guys. So I'm wondering, my biggest question is whether or not he can get on his toes and box behind the jab if he needs to, because I think eventually he will have to. Again, he's slick. He's got good combinations. I really like his left hook. I mean, he'll double, triple, quadruple it. That's a rarity. You don't see it often. But it's his power. Eventually, when he steps up to the very best in the world, he's going to have to deal with a guy who's physically stronger and find a way to box his way around it. And Evanesyan's not going to provide that test, but he's going to be a good test at this point. And I look forward to seeing his career progress. Again, he's only 24.
All right, then next up we got Kell Brook, who will be coming back fighting Michael Zarafa. I don't know if they say his name or not, but we'll call him Michael Z. When you look at this, Jeremiah, what do you expect from Kell Brook? Because he had the devastating losses to Errol Spence, Gennady Golovkin. He's only had one fight in the interim. Do you expect to see the old Kell Brook, or are we just going to see an older Kell Brook?
Well, you're going to see an over-the-hill Kell Brook. I mean, no matter what anybody says, I think as soon as Brook lost to Golovkin, that took some sort of toll, out of him. And he showed up in, good form against Spence. But 2 beatings like that, where you just physically, you're just kind of beaten down, and, that takes it out of you. And the thing about Kell Brook, too, is, I mean, the guy's already had a number of fights. I mean, you look at his resume and you kind of look at a career that could have been more than it was, certainly. I mean, essentially he's resting his resume on the Sean Porter fight. And it's kind of unfortunate because Kell Brook is a skilled guy. I mean, I like what I saw out of him when he was competing at the highest levels. I mean, it's not as if Spence, was just that big of a step, just two step afar where he couldn't compete at, on any level there. He just didn't do what he should have much earlier than what he should have. And, but with Zarafa, Zarafa's a guy who got KO'd by Peter Quillen badly. He's not on that level. This is just something to keep Kell Brook busy and sharp until maybe the Amir Khan fight comes around. I know that's been talked about for many years. A lot of people in Britain have been expecting it for many years. But, of course, with the Amir Khan going to Terrence Crawford talk, you don't know what's going to be next for him. Kell Brook is not going to be able to compete with the best guys at 154, in my opinion. If he wants to win an alphabet trinket, maybe he can target Jaime Munguia. That would sell pretty well. I think he would be his chances against him would be better than they would be against a guy like Hurd, who would probably physically dominate him. Charlo, who I think is just too big and too sharp at this point. So, it's tough to say. I wouldn't mind seeing him cash out against Khan, and then maybe targeting Munguia. But at this point, that's what he's got to look forward to, just cashing out with the biggest domestic fights possible.
All right, next up, John, I'll let you go first because I know this is a fight you wanted to talk about. Mason Menard will take on Teofimo Lopez. What's your take on this one, John?
On this one, it's interesting because I like Lopez, but there's people who do know what they're talking about who think Lopez is the best prospect in boxing. He hasn't. I like him, but he hasn't quite jumped out to me as the best prospect in boxing. There's other guys that I think, and maybe he'll convince me, but at this point, I like him, but there's other guys I think I like a little more. Menard's a guy who, had just cracked the top 10 a couple of years ago when he was on a good roll, and it all went bad for him against Ray Beltran, and then he was unfortunately in with Devin Haney, who is now back living up to his potential after kind of we didn't hear about him for a while, but he looks real good. He's fighting very well. So, and of course Beltran, even though older, is no slouch. But the thing that I have to note about Menard is, the guy, he's got good hand speed. He's got good power, but you have to be accurate with your punches. And he just, when he's been in with the better opposition, he just does not seem to be able to land his punches accurately. And, I'm guessing that he's not going to be able to do that Saturday night against Lopez either, because Lopez is good, and that might lead to Lopez getting him out of there, although to Menard's credit, they did stop it, I think, in the last round, but really kind of almost a mercy type stoppage. But he hung in there till the end against Haney, but he wasn't particularly competitive. But he just, I don't know if it's because of his size or what, but he just can't seem to get his punches off accurately. The only reason I mention that is if somehow he's able to get off against Lopez and land accurately, it could be more interesting. I'm not anticipating that's going to happen, but Lopez being touted by some who are knowledgeable as the best prospect in boxing gives him a lot to live up to, but he's on regular ESPN, so that's a good showcase. And Menard is a credible opponent who has been just on the edge of the top 10, so that makes it a little bit more interesting.
All right, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there is some risk here with Lopez just because Menard can crack. So there is some air that, the apple cart could be upset. I don't see it happening. But John pretty much got the analysis spot on. The only thing I will say, and I've said it before, is I like seeing these guys step up so soon. Americans, Brits, Eastern Europeans, actually the Eastern Europeans have really become trendsetters in that regard, in that they're stepping up quickly and they're not worrying so much about the fodder. They're just, stepping up and actually getting learning fights as opposed to just beating up no-hopers for, 15 fights and then, stepping up levels. I just like to see that. I mean, the kid's in his 11th fight is a good step up, and I hope the trend continues.
All right, next up, we're going to let Jeremiah go first since he is a man crush on Vasyl Lomachenko, who will defend his title against Jose Pedraza. Don't do that again. Don't do that again, or I'm not even going to let you talk about Lomachenko. That was creepy. I know John just got a little freaked out, and I threw up in my mouth a little bit. So don't breathe like that when we say Vasyl Lomachenko, as he will fight Jose Pedraza this week. Pedraza is a guy who beat Raimundo Beltran by unanimous decision. He does have a stoppage. He got stopped in the 7th round by Gervonta Davis. I think this fight is going to be one-sided, Jeremiah, in Lomachenko's favor.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who watches boxing regularly who disagrees with that assessment. I mean, Pedraza is just not at that level. I've actually liked Pedraza coming up, and I thought he was a rock-solid prospect. And, I liked how he can switch stances, and he's tall. Word is he's actually going to be bigger than Linares was on fight night, and maybe he thinks he can physically overwhelm Lomachenko. I don't know. I don't know what his game plan is. I just don't think it really matters. He's just not on that level. I do think that this fight will probably last longer than the Gervonta Davis fight. Davis he has a more come forward approach. He strives for the knockout more than Lomachenko does. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if this fight goes the distance. But yeah, I do think Lomachenko will get him out of there late. Again, he's just a class too much. I mean, for all the switch hitting, that's what I think he will do. I mean, I do think Pedraza will, pull out all the stops. He'll switch from orthodox to southpaw. I think he'll try to use his length again because I think he will. Again, those are just reports so far, but that he will be bigger than Jorge Linares. And again, he's going to have to do these sort of things, but he's going to get outboxed. He's going to be counterpunched. Into submission, and again, I see a late round stoppage.
All right, John, do you agree?
Yeah, basically agree. The only part, and I think just what I add to that, though, what I'm looking for is I think the Davis fight showed us that Pedraza could have trouble with that kind of speed, and Lomachenko is very fast, so. That's where, to me, Pedraza matches up bad. Nobody's. You look at the odds. There's nobody, in essence, giving Pedraza any chance here. And I think Lomachenko, because of his speed and what Davis did to Pedraza, that I agree with Jeremiah. It might be a little bit later with Lomachenko, just the way he fights, but that his speed will be too much, and he'll stop him. I think he will stop him before the end, but. The part that's a little bit intriguing to me of this fight is that the trouble Lomachenko did have with Linares. And Pedraza is a guy who's not quite as good as Linares, but like Jeremiah was saying, I do see that when they first signed this fight, the only thing that interested me very, very slightly about it was that, well, at least style-wise, Pedraza could, bring some of the attributes that Linares brought, then maybe that could make it more interesting. But he wasn't able to fight that way against Gervonta Davis. So maybe that's just not going to work out against Lomachenko either. One thing I like, I've said it before, but it's credit to Lomachenko because some guys don't make this adjustment. One thing I like about him, I'm hoping he carries it over Saturday night, I think he will, is, early in his career, he was winning, but he was kind of falling into the, maybe dull boxer mode, even though, of course, he was extremely talented. And then he started picking it up, stopping guys. And even though a lot of times it was when these guys were kind of going into submission, still, he picks up the pace enough to stop guys. He stopped Rocky Martinez with one shot. He stopped Linares with one shot. And I like that because the guy was talented, but, he let's face it, he's American-based, and he made the adjustment. Sometimes boxing being an entertainment business, and especially some of the Europeans, not all, but they've got to realize that sometimes, and I think he realized that. So I'm hoping he's going to do that Saturday night because it's on ESPN, and you don't want a dull decision type of a thing where Lomachenko is dominant, and I think that. He will go for a stoppage the way he's been trending, and I like that. I mean, the way things have gotten with looking to get some stuff on free TV, even though the odds don't make this a good fight, at least it's Lomachenko, and Pedraza has legitimately cracked the top 10. Like Jeremiah said, Lomachenko's got the ring belt. So, for free ESPN, free, so to speak, not a bad fight to be showing.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead. We're going to talk a little bit about the heavyweight division. It looks like we're looking at what, John? What I saw today, Jeremiah, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like it's going to be around 300,000 buys for Fury Wilder.
Yeah, they're going up now. They're saying about 320, that it went a little bit north of 300.
Yeah, so about 300,000. I still think that shows that these fights should not be on pay-per-view. It's just that simple.
I mean, you would like a wider audience, but in terms of $75 a pop, it's going to generate a lot of gross revenue. But no, I don't want to see the return of a lot of pay-per-views. The only thing I'll say about the three being offered up, or the one that just was Wilder Fury, then you got Pacquiao and Broner and Garcia and Spence, is in terms of competitiveness or potential competitiveness, they're all fights we want to see. Now,
no, wait a second. Now, Pacquiao Broner is not a fight that I would ever pay to see.
Yeah, I just mean fights we want to. I mean, fights we want to see in terms at least competitiveness and intrigue. That's what I'm saying about these three. What the distinction I'm just trying to make is not that I want these pay-per-view or for $75, but they're not the direct of the trend we got when we had things like, Mayweather Berto and Pacquiao Algieri. That model at its worst for pay-per-view, when it was, quote, a star that we supposedly just had to pay for every fight he had, whoever it was, no matter who they were fighting. That was just that stuff was the worst atrocity. Those were the worst atrocities. I'd still rather not have pay-per-view coming back, but the thing that makes these a little bit more of a dilemma is the fights. The fights themselves are good.
All right, now I will direct us towards Jeremiah. We watched the fight on Saturday night. We both thought it was a good fight because it was better than what we expected. Have you watched it again? And if you have, because we see everybody talking about what a great fight it was, do you think it was a great fight?
No, I don't. I mean, I didn't think it was a great fight to begin with. I mean, to me, I think, I don't know, it just feels like people are getting carried away.
People expected, so it was overrated.
Yeah, I mean, great is much too strong a word for that. I mean, go watch a legitimate great heavyweight fight. Go watch, Bo Holyfield, any one of them. I mean, Riddick Bowe, at 240 plus could throw more punches than than Fury and Wilder combined and Joshua and Klitschko combined, and he ate more, than I think he ate nearly 100 more punches in the was it the first Holyfield fight? I mean, I
think combined Holyfield Bowe won because I looked it up, was 1,100 punches and over 500 landed.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's just no comparison. I mean, I don't see these fights as great. I think because we're so long in this drought of talent in the heavyweight division that whenever you get something that is better than the norm, better than the snooze or, snooze fest jab and grab thing that you've had for many years, people get kind of excited. I mean, and again, it exceeded expectations, and in that regard, there was some excitement. I mean, I think we all loved watching Fury get up at the count of six like he was the Undertaker. I mean, that was all fun, and it's one reason to appreciate him, right? It told us something about his character, and we're grateful for that because, again, a lot of us thought that. A lot of people thought, you look at the analysis, a lot of people thought that Wilder would stop him late, and they were almost correct. But no, I don't see a great fight. I mean, it was okay, but the pay-per-view aspect of it. My thing about that is, so again, this is what I go to because I try to envision a bet as much as I can. So if you had Fury and Wilder on free TV. You had much more exposure to that. And so you look at what Fury has kind of become. Fury has kind of become a people's champion after the fact, right? I mean, tons of people are attaching themselves to him and his story because so many average people can relate, right? bouts of depression and anxiety are up in the Western world. I mean, for the first time since World War II, the lifespans of white men is actually going down. So again, the drug abuse, the alcohol abuse, a lot of people can relate to that. And because of that, and again, because a lot of people felt he was shafted by the system, again, a lot of people have attached themselves to him. And it's a good thing, right? I mean, it's nice that there's some personality that's being injected into the heavyweight division. We all know that it needs it. But again, imagine that this was on free TV and millions of people saw that. I mean, Fury, I think, has the potential to be a big guy in America if he wants to. I mean, he's Irish, right? We know how the Irish people are passionate about the fight game too. So you have an Irish guy who's relatable to the masses. There's a lot of selling points there. But again, you're only showing that to 300. I mean, millions watched. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who streamed, but again, I just think if you put that on free TV, there's just a lot more potential there. And I think these pay-per-views, I could be wrong. I don't follow the business side of it like, John does and others do. But with the pay-per-view thing, it almost seems as if they don't want to pay. They have to pay these guys top dollar, or they may go somewhere else. I don't know if that's true or not. Again, this is just kind of an observation. And so what you have is you have guys like Garcia and Spence going to pay-per-view, even if they don't really warrant it. And I think that's a bad thing because that means we might not get these people reaching across lines and giving us the fights we need. But, in terms of the Fury Wilder fight, I wouldn't mind the rematch, but I know Mike and you and I have talked about this. I hope he goes to Joshua. I think he could make huge money there. It'd be huge, domestically. And, that's my opinion.
All right. Man, what was my original question? All right, John, do you think this was a great fight?
Actually, I agree with just about everything Jeremiah said there. The only things that I would add is, and I think I'm making distinction here, Mike, with what you and Jeremiah are saying. I do think it was a great fight, but you guys are bringing up fights that I agree with you in that it was not one of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time, but I think it was a great fight. I think that the drama was there, and with heavyweights, a lot of it's the ebb and flow of the drama. Of course, you have to have punches thrown, but
there weren't punches thrown.
Punches. There was rounds where there weren't that many punches thrown, but there was still a lot of drama in the fight.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I think there was a lot of drama. The way I judge a great heavyweight fight is whether I can watch it a second time, and it's a hard fight to watch a second time when that drama is gone. And when you watch that fight, you see two guys that really aren't wanting to get after it. I mean, I'm sorry. I know you think the heavyweight division today is in good shape. I think it's as bad as it's ever been, including the Klitschko time. I think you've just removed Vladimir Klitschko, and the other guys are all just guys. And I know that I think Joshua is better than Wilder and Fury, probably, but I'm not real impressed by Joshua either. With Fury, I see a guy that defensively for a heavyweight is extremely good. But I want to see some punches thrown at some point. And everybody could say, well, I'm a boxing purist, so I like to see a guy fight like that. I want to see people get hit at some point. I want to see some aggression. I want to see people sit down on their punches. I was impressed by the heart that both men showed. I will give them that. And I know that a year or two ago, I wasn't real sure about Wilder with that. And really, until I saw this fight, I wasn't sure about Fury with that. That's why the only prediction I gave for the fight was, if it went to a decision, there's no way Fury would win, because I don't think it was allowed. And I know that you think that's a conspiracy theory, John, but I don't think it is. I think it's the way. If you look at Gavodstik in his fight, you had the same thing. They're fighting in Canada. Stevenson's the house fighter. You had a guy that had him up by 6 points. And I back in the day, they used to say, well, you got three different judges looking for three different angles. But if you watch these guys, I think in most fights, they're watching on a TV screen and scoring the fight.
Well, and I would add real quickly that you look at again, maybe it's just coincidence, maybe, right? But you had in the Gvozdyk-Stevenson fight, you had one guy with, Stevenson way ahead. You had a draw, and then you had somebody with Gvozdyk winning, just like so many other fights we've seen that have ended in controversy. I mean, again, maybe it's the angles, but again, I just find it a little odd that it just keeps happening. It just seems convenient. But I would add about the boxing part, too, is that it seems as if our notion of pure boxing has changed over the course of years. Because if you look at Willie Pep, who is regarded by many boxing historians as the greatest pure boxer ever, he was throwing punches constantly. You look at Muhammad Ali, who's considered, the best pure boxer in heavyweight history, throwing punches consistently. I mean, you can be a pure boxer and let your hands go. And that's one thing that I wish with Fury. And I actually think he would have won the fight clearly, even more clearly, in my opinion, if he would have just thrown the jab a lot more. I mean, if he would have just filled that space with that long left or right hand, whatever stance he was boxing from. But again, I think it's molded and been shaped over times, maybe because of the amateur ranks, that guys just don't, they're just picking spots. They're jabbing a little bit, and every once in a while they're throwing a power punch to land points. It's almost amateurish in the way that I look at things, and that kind of takes away from the drama to me. It's like, I liked watching Ali, I liked watching Pep, but these guys are just, the Rigondeaux and Laras and Furies of the world. I appreciate their skill, but they could do more.
Yeah, and John, the other thing I see with this is I just don't see where the heavyweight division is that interesting. I think the light heavyweight division's interesting. I think you're interesting at welterweight, lightweight, just because Lomachenko's there. But when I see these guys, I mean, and right now, I don't know if we talk about the fights that are being talked about. Frank Warren today said that he thinks that Usyk will fight in April against Joshua. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's Frank Warren's just pissed off trying to stir some stuff up, because I don't know why Usyk would jump straight into that fight. But I do think it would be possible because of this. I still think Joshua and Wilder are both heavily protected. I think Joshua fought Klitschko because he was old, and it almost backfired on him. I think that Wilder jumped in with Ortiz and Fury because he thought one was old, and he thought the other one, there's no way he could be in shape. And I think if I'm Anthony Joshua and I'm going to fight Usyk, I'd probably want it to be in April, because I think that's his best chance. Because when I look at Usyk, I still don't think he throws enough punches either. But I think Usyk, a year or two from now, if he puts the weight on right, gets to about 215, is the best heavyweight out there.
Well, I think we've entered what is going to go down as a really good heavyweight era. You look at the fights that we've had this year down in the heavyweight division. You had that were really excellent fights. You had Wilder, Ortiz, then you had Parker and White. You had Chisora and Takam. Then you had Wilder and Fury. You got to fight like Martin and Konatsky. I mean, these are a lot of good action fights. That the top 10's getting better. Joshua did fight two legitimate top 10 level guys in Parker and Povetkin. I think the top 10, you're starting to get better guys getting into the top 10. Usyk's going to be there. I think Usyk will fight Povetkin in April because Povetkin has a co-promotional deal with Hearn now, just like Usyk does. I think, Hearn does this stuff for a reason, like all promoters do. And I think that Wilder and Fury are going to fight again made in the U.S., and it'll be pay-per-view. And Hearn's going to have to do something to try to make a splash with Joshua. So I think he'll set that Usyk-Joshua fight up for the fall, and he'll make it about on the ultimate belts, and that Usyk was, unified belt holding, and also recognized by the Ring International to his credit, a cruiserweight champion, and I think he figures in the UK he can probably build that up enough. Now, maybe for U.S. fans, that's going to be a price value because I think you'll get all those fights I'm talking about there with Usyk and Joshua. Joshua fight White again in the spring. Those will all be DAZN fights in the U.S. So, for hardcore boxing fans, it's going to be a deal, but that's not going to give widespread exposure. In the meantime, I think what Jeremiah said about Fury was accurate, and I think we're forgetting, Wilder is the first real top American heavyweight that brings something to the table for a long time. And now he's just come off a lot of exposure, a good pay-per-view showing. You've got that added to the division. The United States has not had that for a long period of time.
I don't think Wilder did himself any great justice here, especially when now he's trying to claim that he fought with a broken arm.
Well, I think that, he brings a lot of, excitement to it. As Jeremiah said, he's right. And Fury showed a lot of heart. Wilder showed a lot of heart. I think you said that as well, Mike, in fairness.
Yeah, they showed heart, but they didn't show boxing ability, I don't think.
Well, there was I agree with Jeremiah saying I think the definition, and that to me a lot goes to scoring fights. I agree with Jeremiah there about I think the definition of boxing ability has changed in all the time I watch boxing. A lot of times I watch now when I see a guy's a boxer, and I think, well, you make the guy miss, you're supposed to make him pay with counter punches, and these guys, congratulate themselves with making him miss, and there's no counter. But I think that does go to the amateur system when they started counting the punches. And I think that we are dealing with a generation of guys that not by their choice, but they had to. They came up in that atrocious count punching system, which has now been abolished, and it's going to take a while for things to cycle back. They've gotten rid of headgear too. You had a system with headgear and punch counting in the amateurs for a long time, and that's gone now. So there's that. We're dealing with guys that came up like that. That's why I was giving Lomachenko some credit because he had 397 amateur fights, and you could see him doing a little bit of that stuff. I've always advocated, even though it was only his second pro fight, I think he could have stopped Salido. I think he could have stopped Salido in that fight, even though he wasn't used to the pro game. He said all that to me. It was just that amateur type thing where he didn't step on the gas. You could see late in the fight that he was getting the idea, but it was too late, and then he's gotten out of that since. But I think that we've got a lot in the heavyweights. You got these guys then you got these fringe top 10 guys like Konatsky and Brazil who are entertaining brawlers. But you need guys like that in the division. Joe Joyce is going to probably end up being one of those guys who's going to knock somebody out or go down because he's huge, but he's kind of plodding. But you can see he's got that thudding, heavy-handed type power. So he's going to be marching forward. He's not going to be able to do much else, and he's going to be in some kind of entertaining, scrap before his time, trying to push into the top 10's done. Ortiz looks like he's still got something left. Usyk's a good wild card. It's going to be interesting to see what he does. So that part adds a little bit of intrigue. If maybe he can fight in just a little bit more of an exciting fashion, but he may be forced to. That's sometimes what's good when he moves up to heavyweight. Sometimes a guy like that can be more entertaining because he's got a heavy puncher who can really hurt him, bearing down on him, and who's got a chance to get to him, and he's got to use his skills and use his boxing brain to find a way to survive and counter and things like that, and that can be interesting. So I think we've probably just entered a real good heavyweight era, and then how good it's going to turn out to be, we'll see in a few years. But I think we've entered it, and I think we'll look back on it and say this was the time when it got good, and we're going to have I think we're going to have a few good years here. And hopefully in the U.S., some of these fights are going to be on Fox because PBC's at least got these lower top 10 guys like Brazil, Konatsky. Brazil's going to be on there on December 22nd. Oscar Negron, you wouldn't be expecting anything, but with Brazil, you never know. It could turn. Negron is big. It could. Who knows? Maybe it turns into a brawl.
All right, Jeremiah, what's your take on the state of the heavyweight division today?
Yeah, so I wanted to say real quick that I think John is onto something in the sense that I think the pairing, the matchmaking is better now than it was. I don't think the divisions I honestly don't think the division's any better than it was, 5 years ago when you had when you had Vladimir and Vitaly and Povetkin and guys like Abragamov, I think those four are better than the four you got now. But I do think that John is right in the sense that matchmaking is better. And if you can put on exciting fights, whether these guys are all that skillful or not, I do think that's a good thing. My interest is not, again, I don't think the division is all that good. Honestly, I look at guys like Deontay Wilder, and I don't even see a guy who's a guy's as good as Michael Grant, honestly. Somebody who was just as tall but longer reach, more skills. To me, again, I don't see a lot of talent there, but if they utilize it correctly, I'm all for it. I mean, we just kind of got
this real quick. You hear them talk about parity in sports. Parity usually is a code word for mediocrity, and when you have 10 guys in a division that are all evenly matched, you're going to get good fights, John. It doesn't mean that they're good fighters.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's the thing, and that's what I think. John probably has a higher view of some of the skill level of these guys than we do, but I think you're right, Mike. I do think that there's just a lot of evenness across the playing field, and therefore it's a bit more exciting. I mean, these guys, especially after this, the Wilder Joshua or the Wilder Fury fight, it looks like these guys are vulnerable and can be upset. My interest is not so much in the state of affairs right now, though I do think Fury has tons of potential if it can be utilized correctly, because Wilder, I think, as you said, Mike, I think he's hurting his stock a bit, not only with the broken arm thing, which we have footage, right? Wasn't he doing the all accesses and stuff, 12 weeks out?
Yeah.
Come on, we have footage. We have footage of him like sparring during that time. If he had really broken his arm, show us the evidence, okay? That's what I want to see. And not only that, on his Twitter today, he posted that stupid 10-count video that's been passed around the pro Wilder groups recently, where you have a guy who's starting the count and saying that Fury was down at the count of 10. Okay, not only was that stopwatch wrong, but that's not to the point. The point is, Fury does not have to beat a 10 count. He has to beat the referee's 10 count. So he very well might have gotten up if he had known, that he was supposed to be up earlier. I mean, it's just I just think he's playing the wrong card there with the whole broken arm thing and the 10 count thing. He's just going down the wrong path. My interest, however. Oh, and again, sorry, I wanted to talk about the personalities a little bit. I think Wilder's going down the wrong road with that stuff. But again, we've talked about Joshua in the past, and he just seems manufactured. Fury, again, just to elaborate a little bit further, and the reason why his appeal is so great now is that he seems genuine. He just kind of shoots from the hip. He sounds like the guy you'd hang out with him in a pub and have a drink and just shoot the shit about whatever, right? And not only that, he listens to good music too. I found that out. But my interest in the heavyweight division is not so much what we've got now, and I do think you're right about the parity thing. I'm interested to see what prospects are going to turn out to be top notch in the future. You have a lot of interesting guys coming through the ranks, and again, not any all-time greats that I'm seeing so far, but you've got guys like Tony Yoka, an Olympian. You got Oscar Rivas, who looks pretty good. Sergey Kuzmin, who looks pretty good. I'm not even sure how to say the name, but Hrgovic. He looks like a big puncher. He looks interesting. You've got some Russian prospects on the way. Teslenko from Ukraine. So you've got some interesting guys coming up through the ranks, and a lot of them are speeding up pretty quickly. So I'm more interested to see what lays ahead in about 3-4 years.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that, John, I am excited what the heavyweight division could be. Just not with the guys that are there right now. Except I think Usyk is intriguing. I think Usyk can probably punch harder than what we've seen. And, Evander Holyfield became a bigger puncher when he went to heavyweight because steroids are a really nice thing. But the one thing that you didn't answer here was, what's your take on the broken arm thing, John?
Oh, my take. Well, first of all, I think that the guys now do have talent. I think outside of the Klitschko's, that era was very weak. I think these guys, this is going to be proved to be a better deeper division. And, I agree with the prospects sure on my side, and I'd throw Chagba in there because I think he's going to end up being better than those guys. But the broken arm thing, I just attribute that to a lot.
You there, John?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now. You cut out. We didn't really hear your answer.
Okay, sorry. I just attribute that to a lot what you see of boxers where, sort of their strengths can be their weaknesses. And what I mean with that is, these guys have to have so much self-belief that a lot of them will, after a certain fight, they'll make a lot of excuses. Because in other words, they have to have so much belief. It's an individual sport. It's a one-on-one competition. There's nobody else to fall back on or blame or anything like that. So I think you see a lot of that because I like very much the way Fury handled himself the night of the fight and before he left the U.S. But then when you saw him back in the UK, you saw whining about, the decision and stuff like that you didn't see when he was over here. But, I think that's a lot of boxers at the top level. These guys have to have a lot of belief in themselves, and it's their way of psyching themselves up or whatever you want to call it. And that's what a lot of times brings these older fighters back when they shouldn't be coming back because that's their personality type. It's part of what made them great, but then it can also be their weaknesses at times when they take it too far. So that's what I would just attribute it to. I actually do on those things use the test that Jeremiah does. If somebody wants to give evidence of a medical record or something like that, I'll be happy to take a look at it. But there could be something to it. But I'm not really, that's not really a big concern of mine. What Wilder's saying of that, and I'm not really taking it into big account in my evaluation. Just we know that he has had a broken hand before, but I don't know exactly what he's talking about here.
Yeah, because nobody gives a shit. Because losers make excuses. And that's for any sport. And I'm not just saying him. Anybody that makes an excuse. And I just don't buy it. Just like Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao, that was a joke. Nobody believes.
Yeah, it's a shoulder thing. Yeah, it's a shoulder thing. It's the shoulder thing 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah. Manny Pacquiao was full of crap. So's Deontay Wilder. Because you know what? If it was true, say something beforehand before people pay $75. Because to me, if Manny Pacquiao really was hurt, I don't care. My problem with it is he still let his fans pay $100 to see him fight injured. And the same thing, if Wilder was really hurt and he went in and fought and still took people $75, they had to make him pay everybody back. Because you're seeing something that you didn't pay to see. Because beforehand, if everybody knows he broke his arm or his hand or whatever bull crap he wants us to believe, he shouldn't have been fighting. So,
well, yeah, and
I think the commission technically has a form for that pre-fight as well.
Yeah, there was nothing
if I recall.
Wrong.
So I don't. I mean, it's not something that really goes into my evaluation of things.
So, yeah, and I would add just real quick, and Mike, I think you're pretty familiar with this, but when you're an athlete operating at the highest of levels, even when you're not operating at the highest levels, it's not that common to be 100% when you go and do something. I mean, when you're stressing your body out continuously, injuries happen all the time. Minor injuries happen all the time. Your knee hurts or your elbow hurts or this or that. There are plenty of times. I mean, I think most guys enter fights with injuries and or they're something is upset or it's not quite right. I mean, it happens all the time. Just in my experience, there's again, you're not 100% a lot of times.
Yeah, and if you look at an NFL team or a college football team or even a high school football team, if you're in week 2 or 3 and you're not banged up, you're not very good. So, and as my dad used to tell me, if you go out there and play, I assume you're going to win. So, if you go out there, you're not really injured. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? Because I'm bored by the heavyweights.
Yeah, I got something.
I like the heavyweights right now, but we talked about it, so that was about all that was on my mind. Is I think we've got some myself. I think we got some good heavyweight action going.
Yeah, none of these guys would have been ranked in the top 10 in 1995.
Yeah, so my thing that I would like to talk about is today they announced the Hall of Fame class of 2019. So the modern inductees are Julian Jackson, Buddy McGirt, and Donald Curry. The old timers is Tony DeMarco. Teddy Atlas is also getting in. I would just say that I don't agree.
What's Teddy Atlas getting in as?
I think as an announcer.
Okay.
He's not getting in as a trainer, I know that, but I think he's getting in as an announcer.
And my other question is this. Who exactly did Julian Jackson beat?
Well, I mean, I guess you have Harold Graham and you have Terry Norris.
Norris, yeah.
So he's not a Hall of Famer.
No, he's not. He was.
I'm sorry. I see everybody acts like Donald Curry's a sure thing Hall of Famer. Donald Curry was really good. Donald Curry, I think, belongs in before anybody that got in today that was a boxer. But I don't think Donald Curry's a Hall of Famer, and we've had this discussion before, but I think Hall of Fames are for all-time greats. He beat Marlon Starling. He beat Milton McCrory. He got destroyed by Mike McCallum, who's an actual Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I agree with you. And not only that, to me, Donald Curry didn't have the mentality of an all-time great. You know, it's yeah, sure, the skill set was there. You know, he looked fantastic. That's why a lot of people were he was a heir apparent for many. A lot of people thought he was going to go on and do great things. But to me, mentally, he just didn't have. He didn't have when you look at Ray Leonard, when you look at Thomas Hearns got stopped, but he didn't give a crap. He just picked it up and he took his gym bag to the to the crunk and just got on with his day. To me, Curry was just not the same guy after the Hunnigan loss. Mentally, again, I just don't think he had it. With Julian Jackson, we've talked about this. We've been into it with Bob Day over this. Okay, I don't think Nigel Benn deserves it.
No, but he belongs before those guys.
Of course, because Gerald McClellan blitzed Julian Jackson, but Ben was able to tough it out and stop McClellan late in the fight. I mean, to me, that says more about Ben than it does Jackson. I mean, Jackson couldn't overcome that sort of stuff. He was stopped early by McClellan. He was stopped early, fairly early by Mike McCallum. To me, not only was a near contemporary in Nigel Benn more worthy, but where's Michael Nunn in all this? I wonder why he's not put on the ballot. Nunn was another guy who was a heir apparent. He got himself into personal issues.
Jeremiah,
and whatnot.
Here's my question, though. Real quick, here's my question. And do you consider Michael Nunn a Hall of Famer of what he did, or are you saying this just because you think they're putting in people that did less than what he did?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much using the bar of who did more in the same time frame. Yeah, because I look at Michael Nunn's career, and to me, he's a what could have been. He is like the Donald Curry of middleweights. And actually, I think that suits him. He was the Donald Curry of middleweights, where he had tons of talent. And to be honest with you, I liked his run from Frank Tate to the James Toney loss. I think he was pretty solid in there, because even though Donald Curry happened to be one of those defenses, Curry was still technically rated at 154.
Marlon Starling, and that was an old Marlon Starling, and an old Marlon Starling, if I remember, took him to a majority decision. It was a close fight.
Starling was the lineal champ too.
Yeah, I ran Barkley, majority decision. Sambu Kalambe, I think, was the big thing on his record that stands out to me, because Kalambe was a really good fighter and he beat him. But Frank Tate, Juan Roldan, that was after Roldan had been decapitated by Hearns and Hagler. I don't think he was the same there. So really, when I look at it, I hate to say this, especially if Bob Day's listening, but I'd put Nigel Benn over before Michael Nunn.
Yeah,
no way for me. No way for me there. Sorry, Bob. I'm with Jeremiah on Michael Nunn.
So give me the wins. Give me the impressive wins he had. Because Nigel Benn destroyed Iran Barkley. Marlon Starling was old. Donald Curry was old. James Toney stopped him, even though he was winning that fight until then. the Callum Bay win is the only win here on Nunn's record that really stands out to me, because the Barkley fight was razor close, as was the Starling fight.
Nunn was really like the middleweight guy and considered, you're right at the top of boxing when he was on the run Jeremiah talked about. And, when he fought Starling was the, welterweight champ and was stepping up. That was kind of an old school matchup, not the best style mesh matchup, but an old school matchup in that sense. I think that Nunn, I agree with Jeremiah's comparison there. I mean, I think Nunn and Curry were just guys that were really good, and it happens sometimes. It just ended early for them, and you can rightfully take that as saying, well, that's a strike against those guys. But sometimes in sports and boxing, we do have guys that legitimately, were really good for a relatively brief period of time, and they just didn't. They passed everything else but the longevity quotient, which, your top greats of all time do pass the longevity quotient. The Boxing Hall of Fame, as three of us have talked before, the Hall of Fame is in all sports except baseball. Just for me, the criteria is just too unclear. That I don't in baseball, I'll get in a debate about it. The other sports, I just can't. I mean, I could see why boxing wants to have a Hall of Fame. It's good that they have one. I'm not against them having a Hall of Fame, but I guess for me, the debate in boxing that I look at that really matters is who truly are the greatest fighters of all time. If we're going to have the top 100, say.
Yeah, and none of those are named
original.
Michael Nunn or Donald Curry or Nigel Benn.
Right. And then, who was the top 10 in the original 8 weight classes? If we were ranking 8 weight classes, who would be the top 10 or 20 classes? And, that's really where the debate comes in. I mean, we all know that there's these guys in the Hall of Fame so what are we really debating, right? As who should be in or not in as to what, right? Like Mike, like you said, the guys who are already in there or not, is that the standard? I mean, in terms of like kind of what we're doing of Hall of Fame, because boxing needs one, an entertainment, and kind of the look of some of the guys, remembering as fighters. I like Donald Curry. I mean, I like Buddy McGirt. I always felt Jackson was overrated. I agree with Jeremiah. Looking at the 2 wins, having lived through these guys' careers and observed them as they went on, I do remember thinking even before Julian Jackson knocked out Harold Graham that, somewhere down the line, there's going to be people who don't realize how boxing got watered down, and they're going to be talking about this guy who just fought on 154 pounds and had some power against lesser guys and overrating him. I could see it coming.
You know
already,
what? Julian Jackson to me is Mike Tyson.
Well, I think Mike Tyson's a lot better than him, but I
don't know why Jackson he didn't beat anybody. He lost every significant fight he had.
Did get the Harold Graham KO. Well, because Mike Tyson became lineal champion in the heavyweight division.
He didn't beat anybody.
No subsets to the heavyweight division or anything. He knocked out. He's the only guy to knock out Holmes. He's the only guy to knock out Spinks. Tyson was one of those more of a shorter run type of a guys. And I wasn't one of these, nor I am now one of these crazy Tyson people. But I think I can evaluate him, fairly in what he did. And he's another one of those guys that, and with him it was even more to his credit because he just eradicated the entire division and became the lineal champ. But it was a short-lived type of a thing, and he loses out some on the longevity quotient.
Well, that and the fact that anytime somebody fought him back, they knocked him out, or he bit him. So to me, that's the problem with Mike Tyson. And I don't think anybody he was beating in the 80s was real good. I think Michael Spinks was a grown-up light heavyweight. I mean, come on.
But he beat Holmes.
Yeah, in 1988. Let's see him do it in 1978. Hell, let's see him do it in 1994. I don't know if he could have done it. But I think the only giving Holmes a month and a half to train probably had something to do with it, too. But I think Tyson was very talented. But when he fought people that matched his aggression, he got beat. I mean, to me, he's a Hall of Famer if you go by what he brought to the sport for those 10 years he was there, 15 years. I think he's a Hall of Famer because of that. Just like I talked about Gotti and even Sylvester Stallone. Some people bring something to boxing, and what that is they bring people that aren't normal boxing fans out to watch them fight. And he did that. You know, Sylvester Stallone brought a ton of people to boxing. He brought guys like Vinny Pazziana. Vinny Pazziana became a boxer because of the movie. So I got no problem with that. If you're going strictly on Mike Tyson's career, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer because I think it's got to last longer than that. And when you fight guys like Holyfield, you got to at least be competitive. And, I mean, that first fight, he lost all but 2 rounds maybe. And in the second fight, he tapped out. Against Lennox Lewis, he gets destroyed. I know everybody's going to say he's older, but I think they were about the same age. And if I'm not mistaken, Evander Holyfield's older than Mike Tyson. So, to me, I think there's a lot to be said in boxing for being able to last longer. Football, a perfect example of football is Terrell Davis. Terrell Davis gets in the Hall of Fame. But for the 3 or 4 years before he blows his knee out, he is the best running back. He's the MVP, and it's football. I mean, running backs don't last that long. Gale Sayers only lasted 6 or 7 years. So I think that's a little bit different. And I just think at some point, intangibles make Hall of Famers. If we're just looking at what somebody does. And intangibles were something guys like Curry and Nunn and even Nigel Benn were missing. Intangibles are what guys like Joe Louis, Sam Langford, Muhammad Ali, they all had intangibles that made them damn near impossible to beat unless you were an all-time great also. And I think the intangibles are what separates all-time greats from just really good fighters that we like to watch. Julian Jackson didn't have those intangibles. I think Mike McCallum is the guy that had those intangibles. And Mike McCallum beat the crap out of Julian Jackson.
Yeah. Well, and I would add on to that with the heavyweight division, it sucks, but I don't think many people talk about it. You kind of have to lower the bar for the heavyweight division. I mean, it's one of those divisions that's usually a bit thinner in talent than others. And so that's why when you see these top tens of hardcore boxing fans, I mean some of them are all over the place. I mean, and that's because once you get after Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali, I mean there's a lot of freedom to be said there, right? You have Jack Dempsey. Well, he was a transcendent figure and this and that, and he brought boxing into the mainstream, but his resume isn't all that great, and then you look at Tyson, like you said, he couldn't beat the best guys that he fought. He lacked heart, but he's a top 10 guy for a lot of guys because if you compare him to somebody like Sonny Liston, who's also around there, and Liston didn't have a great resume. I mean, he rests his case largely on Floyd Patterson. I just think with the heavyweight division, it's unfortunate, but you got to lower the bar because the talent level is thinner. That's why I always rank, I don't do these pound for pound lists often, but when I think about them in my head, I don't really rank heavyweights all that high just because their level of competition is lower and they don't have the fluidity of competition that people below them have. I would say about the Hall of Fame too, and I think that some of these guys are shorted because of the way boxing is. I know I've been over this a good number of times, but if you forced guys, if you had one champion per division, you didn't have so many divisions guys could run to, and you forced guys to defend against the top guy every so often, you would get a lot more clarity there. You couldn't do this running around, and then you got, I was looking at Rick Glazer, talk about the Hall of Fame today, and I saw a bunch of guys say Chris John deserves to be in, and this is the
another one that thinks that is Anthony George, and he thought Chris John was like the number one guy that should get in this year.
Well, yeah, and Rick Glazer himself, his reasoning almost verbatim was, I chose Chris John as quickly as I chose my wife or something like that. And then he started, like all these other guys, he started going on about the bloated statistics, like, oh, he had 18, 19 defenses, yada, yada, yada. He beat Marquez. Marquez, it was a controversial decision. And then you look at the rest of his resume, and all you're doing, I saw people in the comment section doing it too. Oh, he was the WBA Fighter of the Year in 2008. Who gives a shit about any of that? Who cares about his numbers? This is not Eusebio Pedroza incarnate, okay? The dude beat like two or three top 10 fighters in his entire career. Do not tell me that that's Hall of Fame worthy stuff, because it's not. Again, you go look at Rocky Lockridge. Yeah, he didn't have all the defenses and all the shiny stuff, but in my opinion, he beat far better competition.
Oh, hell yeah. And he got screwed over against far better competition that he beat.
Exactly, and people, for some odd reason, this is why I don't know who's getting the ballots. I know a number of people who do have ballots, and a lot of them are respectable. But if you're telling me that Chris John deserves in more than Rocky Lockridge, I don't think you should. I don't think you should be filling out the ballot.
Well, put it like this: if I remember, the last I remember seeing a Chris John, he was struggling against Rocky Juarez, and I thought Juarez beat him the first time they fought, and the second time was not a blowout.
And let me tell you that Rocky Juarez is one of the top 10 guys that Chris John fought. Yeah. And the only reason Chris or Juarez became top 10 is because he fought Chris John closely. So Juarez was not ranked in the top 10 in the first fight. After the draw, he became in the top 10, and then he got that tough decision. I mean, Chris John was not that impressive.
Well,
okay?
If you look at Chris John, probably the first... Shit, when's the first time he left Indonesia to fight? I mean, every fight is at home. He fought in Australia in 2005. So after a decade, he fought somewhere else. And he fought Marquez at home in Indonesia. And almost every one of his fights was in Indonesia. And the thing is, if you've ever seen John and Marquez, it's a very close fight. That, if I remember right, was scored like 117 to 111 by all three judges or something. And when you look at John, he didn't fight in the United States until he fought Rocky Juarez. So he's got like maybe 5 fights out of 50 or out of 49 that were not fought in Indonesia. So he was protected, and he wasn't very good. And Anthony George and Rick Glazer, I don't know what you're smoking. But John Einreinhofer wants some of it.
I'm with Jerem.
He's like, West Virginia sucks.
I need some of that. But I'm like, I always think it's underrated. I still think to this day it works, even if it's old school. I think if you want to really, figure out how good a guy was and compare eras. Of course, you're looking at who they fought and who they beat, but you look at if there were 8. Or if you want to look in the modern era with a cruiserweight, I don't even think you need to, frankly. But 8 divisions, 1 champ a division, a normal top 10. Would these guys? Where would they have been in the top 10? How long would they have likely been a champion? That really separates it. I find when you start doing that, that separates out the pretenders, and that's where some of these guys that like we're talking about, like a Chris John, they just don't pass it. They just don't pass that test.
Well, put it like this: Chris John would never make anybody's top 10 featherweights of all time.
Not even close.
No, I mean, would he even make it top 50?
No, I don't know.
I don't think he would.
Yeah,
I mean, he'd be down there around 172 with Rocky fucking Juarez. But yeah, it drives me nuts because Chris John is not a Hall of Famer. And see, I know that I bust Bob Day's balls about Nigel Benn all the time, but I think Nigel Benn was a very good, respectable champion who I really enjoyed watching. I can't say any of that about Chris John.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, Ben at least gave his all. Ben was a guy.
Yeah, he did.
He really went and got it. I mean, and you got to give him a lot of respect for that. My problem is, of course with Benny, he wasn't the lineal champ or anything, but the McGirt thing too, and I liked McGirt's style.
I thought he was a hell of a fighter, but he's not
I thought he was, I thought he was old school. But what's he got? Simon Brown? What else does he have other than Simon Brown?
Well, he gave Pernell
his
Whitaker
name.
trouble because he actually may have won a round against him in their first fight, or a few rounds, actually, if I remember right. But that's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, that's notable. That's worth something. But I've seen tons of guys
That's not
give
Hall of Fame
all-time
worthy, though.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen tons of guys give all-time greats tough fights, right? We've seen that a bunch of times.
Dave Tiberi's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Tony's not in there yet, but yeah, I mean, every once in a while, a guy can give you, sometimes it's a style thing. Sometimes
Wait a second. Hold on. I don't pay much attention to the Hall of Fame crap because of what we're talking about. But you're telling me that James Toney's not in the Hall of Fame and Chris John is.
Well, but I don't think James Toney's technically retired.
That's because Tony keeps fighting, right?
Yeah, that's right.
He's not retired.
Well, he is the WIFI super heavyweight champion of the world right now.
Yeah, that's.
But Tony. But Tony, if we were having a Hall of Fame where we were really being exclusive, Tony would be one of those guys, as we all three probably agree. You're looking to get in. But I like to bring up his name when people are overrating some of the modern guys because, when you got Tony knocking out Michael Dunn at middleweight, and then he's knocking out Evander Holyfield and standing toe-to-toe with Samuel Peter.
That was a pretty old Ali, though. But I will give him the Sam Peter thing. Or a pretty old Holyfield.
I mean,
yeah.
No, it was. But and then the excitement of that Jirov win and just, along the way, it just shows what a guy. And it doesn't mean he didn't have bad performances here and there, but with all the fights he had. But it just shows you a guy who is talented and truly a great fighter. The kind of things that can be accomplished.
Yeah, and Buddy McGirt, when you look at his record, he lost to Meldrick Taylor in 1988 by TKO. He beat an old Howard Davis. He got a nice win over Tommy Ayers. If you remember, at some point, some people thought Tommy Ayers was going to be a great fighter. He shut that down, I think, in the second round on CBS. Beat Simon Brown. Patricio Oliva was a good fighter. He beat him. Gennaro Leone was a decent fighter. He loses to Pernell Whitaker. He beats an old Livingstone Bramble. Yeah, there's no way he should be in a Hall of Fame.
No, not even close.
No.
And a lot of people are saying, well, if you combine his work as a trainer, I don't think that's how the Hall of Fame works. I think you get in either or.
I think it does work that way in a lot of cases, though.
Maybe it does, but I'm just trying to think of another case like that. And like Jack Blackburn, the trainer of Joe Louis, his resume is, superior to his resume is superior to McGirt's, and he ended up getting in as a trainer. Maybe that's because he was best known as a trainer, but I don't know. I didn't see anybody making that case for him early on. But if they're doing that, that's more understandable. I wouldn't be so mad if you're combining the two.
Yeah, but I don't know that Buddy McGirt's anywhere near a Hall of Fame trainer either right now.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I like Buddy McGirt. He was on our show. You go to gruelingtruth.net, click in a search, punch in Buddy McGirt. Great interview. I think he's a really good trainer. I think he was a really good fighter. But I don't think the Hall of Fame is for guys that when you think about him, you think, oh, he was really good.
Yeah, agreed.
But all right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up because John's got court in the morning. Jeremiah does too, but they're on different sides of the aisles. All right.
for different reasons, though.
But, all right, guys, we are going to wrap this up tomorrow on Survive.
I might not be on this show next week.
Tomorrow, well, if John's your lawyer, you probably won't. But
I was going to say, if you get me, you will be on.
He'll be in jail for sure. But tomorrow at noon on Survive in Advance, check out me and Steve Risley as we'll have Jackie Sherrill, former college football coaching legend, on to talk a little bit about the college football playoff system. On Friday, we'll have the Friday Football Frenzy with me, Steve, and NFL coaching legend Ed Biles, who was the head coach of the Houston Oilers after Bud Phillips, also integrated college football in the early 1960s. So make sure you check out those shows. And go check out thegruelingtruth.net for the Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder post-fight show that we had earlier in the week. Remember, you can hear all of our shows at Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser. I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.